Hi everybody, I'm Emma and I am joined by David Galbraith, is based in the North Island, not the Hamilton anymore. David, whereabouts are you based?
Oh, so I'm in two places, out on the coast at Marakopa, for anyone who knows the west coast of the North Island, south of Kawhia in Taharoa. I try to be out there as much as I can, but we also have a family base in Hamilton where I have to come in and actually put on sneakers or track pants or sport-related clothing and go and do that sort of thing as well. So my work boots are my butcher's knife and my no, it's not Swannies anymore because that we've evolved. I think it's my Swazi Swanee would be where I prefer to be.
Yeah.
And look, I have a wicked time with people when I come back into civilization. So the other two places I rest my head to have a sleep each. Yeah.
So David, we've chatted before, but you're a reformed or a former psychologist, and your career has been pretty interesting with the people you've been trained with. Maybe you can give me a bit of background into that in regards to why you even moved into that area. And I think what I want to talk about today is for people that are surviving and hopefully thriving through what's happening in the pandemic, is how we can use courage. It's something that resonated with me with what I was reading about with your book, which you can maybe talk a bit more about too. And how that sort of kind of is going to be something that we all need to sort of fall back on and look at for ourselves. So tell me a bit more about yourself, if you can, David.
Absolutely. Just, I guess, quickly, I was a clinical psychologist for 20 years, trained in Auckland. I actually moved around the universities, as I mentioned earlier on. My grades were terrible. So I basically tracked wherever I could go and then ended up at Massey because that was the only university that took me to do my master's paper. Applied 15 times to get into the clinical programs around New Zealand and got in on the 15th. Got my first interview on the 15th time. And I was just lucky that I pumped my grades up a little bit doing my master's papers, but I hadn't finished my thesis, which got a terrible grade as well. And that just dragged I think I'm probably the lowest ever academic achiever in clinical psychology in New Zealand's history. I'm pretty sure if they did some sort of research on that, my grade would be the lowest grade ever for someone to have got through that program. And then was very, very lucky in Auckland to be working with, and this is, I think, the thing that's, although my grades were poor, it's really good evidence about what intelligence really is, and also not necessarily just what intelligence is, but how we can help people uncover their greatest selves. I was so lucky to be supervised and work under some exceptional people in the 8-9 years I was in Auckland. And we mentioned one, Nigel Latta, before. So when you're mentored by the best in the world, it's no surprise, Sherlock, that you become one of the best as well. And that's just a byproduct of being, I think, humble, hardworking, generous, and being surrounded by people that are so eager to help people achieve. And so everything that I do and did, I reckon, sits back really in the origins of being in a place which was pretty free about humanity and what humanity was about, and working in forensics or the criminal area for a long time before I came into sport. It's so raw and real, like it really, it moves you away from trying to be operating from a book or a model or a framework out of a book. And it challenges you to connect with people and understand relationship is the most important variable in all things we do. So there's one day that stuck out in the clinical trade. I remember what the Auckland director said, one of the lectures, clients will not, the words were profound. I think I can remember them word for word. Clients will not remember what you did or ask them to do. They will remember how they felt. And I went, light bulb. It was like, I just went, I wrote it down and I put a box around it. And then in my head it was,
you got such excitement. I love it.
It's my phone. And then in the end, it was basically what it said to me is that it didn't matter a rat's backside what I knew, whether I was an A+ or a C or a D a student. It was connecting with people. And so that's been probably the thing that's been at the forefront of my mind right through, and even Olympic sport now and Super Rugby, it's been the same thing. It's honestly, there are so many people out there, when you hear me talk and hear them talk, it's like, I just think, oh my God, they're so intelligent. And I don't even know what the words they're using or what they're saying. And I just keep coming back to that one thing. It doesn't matter, David. It's okay.
Doesn't matter. No.
It doesn't matter.
Because people don't connect with it always. That can actually make people feel disconnected from it and not want to be actually engaging with it. You've got to be talking on the language and the humanness that we have. And so that's peeling back and not being ego, just having a conversation. And the way that's like, it's interesting talking with you for the last wee while now, is just how engaging your smile is. And that's a small thing, but that then would come across when you think about that with interacting with people. That is a huge opening, and that's how people feel when they see you smile and engage like that, and the energy and warmth that comes off people, that people don't often actually associate that as being actually medicinal in many ways, or actually that'll make you feel better.
Yeah, and that, thank you. I hadn't thought about that, but
you've never thought about that?
No. The summary bit for me in that is what you and I talked about before, which is the importance of inside out versus outside in. And so my whole clinical career was a time that came for me. It's amazing how the universe works. But if I had not become a clinical psychologist, I would have been a psychiatric patient for sure. My 20s were that rough. So I was becoming a clinical psychologist in a clinical program that was so diverse and liberal and accepting of experiences that along with good mentorship from the people that I was working with in and around criminal psychology in Auckland, that saved my life, I reckon, when I look back now. And maybe that was why I ended up being a psychologist. People often ask, do you feel like we're following a life vision? And I went, mate, I was standing in the Canterbury University Island campus after doing my undergraduate with a D, or just to scrape through to get through the next level. And I was thinking, now what? And I just remember thinking, well, all the women that do psychology are quite pretty. So if you want a really pretty girlfriend, you probably should keep doing psychology. That was why I kept doing psychology. It's just like, go figure. There wasn't any deep dive, this is my life path, this is my life vision, it's calling me, like bullshit.
You're a cool boy, not something else.
It was such a shallow motivation at that point. But then when I got further on and got into Auckland, I remember one lady I was working with, Lynn Nichols. She was an ex-Steiner teacher. Amazing lady, been a counsellor for many years and a teacher for many years. And I just look at that time now, and I remember sitting there, we'd do group therapy with developmentally delayed criminal offenders, like really high-risk offenders. And we're doing group therapy with them twice a week for 3 hours. And she was my boss or manager or supervisor of the program. And we'd be in a room for 3 hours with these young men. And I remember sitting there one day and sort of get hit by a bus, this is what it was about. As well as being a dad, so to help me be a better dad, I think it was those two things. That's where psychology, I think, then ended up with me here. So that's a very short story. Always want to be a farmer through that. I've now resigned as a psychologist. I did the 20-year mark. That was for me the marker. So 20 years this year, retired this year, and now farming. So now I'm a sheep and beef farmer.
Mixed farmer.
A little farmer, but little farm, big farmer, little farm.
I think it's so lovely you're coming back to your roots as well, because you were saying about how your dad was a farmer and you're growing up in that and creating that lifestyle. And one of the things we had talked conversations before about was that the identity and spirit, and how you finding that for ourselves all on the way. Sometimes we have to do what's society or the boxes that to get to where a certain point is where you can follow that a bit more. And I think it's really lovely to see that you are at that point in your youth.
Yes, feel really. That's right. I feel very really lucky, actually. Really lucky. Yeah.
That's
cool.
Good. So but can you tell me about that courage? Because courage just came up with what you talk about and in your book as well. Maybe a bit more about the book, but tell me about how come courage has been one of those resounding, I guess, keystones for you.
The courage, the framework that I operate from, because it came inside out. I remember my own distress because if I give a clinical diagnosis to what I had or was struggling with in my 20s, it was a generalized anxiety disorder with panic attacks, chronic depression, and and periods of acute psychotic disorder. So I was pretty mucked up cat. And then part of my final prep for the exam in the last clinical year was to do Tony Robbins' personal power program.
Yeah. And
I remember seeing it because I was living in a woolshed at that stage. The irony is I was living in a woolshed of a guy called Bill Thomas, who was Arthur Allen Thomas's brother. And if people remember, Arthur Allen Thomas was acquitted of murder. And I'm sitting in his brother's woolshed when I was living in Auckland by myself, my horse in the paddock. And I was sitting there with command hallucinations to kill people. And it was just like, I was thinking to myself while I was having those psychotic breaks, how ironical it was. I was in the woolshed of the brother of a prosecuted then acquitted murderer. So it was just like, whoa, the universe is one wacky thing. But anyway, what I recognized from listening to Tony Robbins at that point was that anxiety was merely, it had so many masks. There's so many masks which are anxiety. And if we think about the humanity, the spectrum of humanity, for me, it's from joy and peacefulness to psychosis. It's all on the same line. And it's all part of who we are. So when people ask people, do you ever have any deep emotional moments? And they're like, no. I go, bullshit. Like all people move backwards and forwards along that line, to panic, to anxiety, to sad, to depression, to some moving extreme anxiety, panic attack, and then it carries on, you go to psychosis. So it's all the same line. And what I took from this listening to Tony Robbins was the importance of courage, which also made common sense to me that we were afraid. No one think. The irony is, no one knew I had that shit going on. Right? There was a crazy.
You cover up pretty well. You masked up.
You could just totally the mask is it. Yeah, the masks are it for sure. And no one, even now when they read the book, it's like we had no idea. And I go, no, that's right. And so that's why you look at people around you, and everyone wears masks. The recognition of that was the thing that freed me up, because I thought, well, if my fear is that big, now I started to think about yin and yang back then, that it's all in harmony, that if my fear is my dark, but it's massive, and my courage is little, I'm going to be imbalanced and stuffed. So I just worked on achieving harmony with my yin and yang and thought, well, I've got to pump my courage up to match my fear rather than get caught up on trying to stop my fears. So I didn't, and this even now when I work with athletes and people who come in with anxiety disorders and whatever, I really want them to understand, we're not going to do any work on reducing your anxiety. I can't help your anxiety. I can't help your depression. I can't help your anxiety, because they're all a product or a process of psychology that leads, it's chain reaction. There's so many things that happen before that moment that we get anxious. So I can't actually help that. And that was really where it became really clear for me about how it all worked. And then I went, okay, so courage and coward are, for me, the starting points of either anxiety or self-belief. So they just lead down different chains. So long story short, I realized if I was going to be at one with my anxiety and find liberation, I had to grow courage. So then I thought, what's the most courageous thing I could do? That was a question I asked myself. And I thought, well, I've got to hold a HQ Kingswood 72 station wagon. And they just built the expressway from Mercer to Auckland, 4 lanes. And it was just like, I was looking out my window of the woolshed, which overlooked that valley, and looked over the road, and I thought, I know what I can do. I can drive my car on the fast lane all the way into Auckland. So I used to go over the Mercer Bridge, for people that know the Mercer Bridge, down onto the motorway and drive all the way from there. 60 Ks. It's exactly 60 Ks downtown Auckland. So I'd drive, because I was working in Mount Eden at that time, and I'd go on the motorway and drive 35 miles an hour for 60 Ks into Auckland. And man, people used to abuse the hell out of me.
So that was your courageous moment.
Well, yeah, because my underlying fears was directly linked to upsetting people. So my panic and extreme anxiety came from a deep fear that if I upset people and they wouldn't think very nice things about me. And I also thought I'd get the bash. So there was a double line in there. So I thought, that could probably lead me to get the bash, and it would definitely upset people. So I went to martial arts training in Bukakohe as well. So I started doing some martial arts back then too. So I thought, I better upskill myself if I'm going to upset people. So I'd just drive on the motorway, and people would come up behind me and toot and say horrible things to me. So I'd wind down my window and I'd just go, fuck off. And keep on driving. And then I had my window down because I want to have a chat about my mum on the way past, and I have a little chat about their whakapapa as well. And then that was really where it started, and that was when I really started to work hard on the relationship with courage and anxiety. And everything that I've done in sport has originated from that. It's all about courage. The frameworks I work with in sport are all inside out from my own stuff, all from courage. And now the crazy bit for us is that was all correct, even though that was just on assumptions and listening to people and in my own processing. But now when they do MRI scans, the MRI scans now show that courage is a neurological mediator between the limbic system and the frontal lobes.
Nice.
So quite clearly, that's probably one of the most influential scientific findings of all time. That if we have a courageous perspective, when we're confronted with an adverse moment like the COVID crisis, our reaction to that, our action in that, whether we're able to connect with others, to form a plan, to keep collaborative, keep moving forward, to think openly about what's actually going on with the COVID, because that's what I've been struck by, is by how many people don't think and don't look for the right numbers to actually make their own decisions about what this pandemic is about. And so that's what courage does, is allows us to have an adverse stimulus, a challenging moment or a crisis come at us, for our brain to see that and then to step into that. From courage is a completely different experience than from coward. So coward for me is a very loaded term, but it just makes sense to me that coward is when we make decisions based on fear and catastrophe and self-doubt, and it takes us away from our potential. So we're stepping away from our potential, or what the dream may be, so you can think dreams as well, but it's more about it. We're stepping away from ourselves. That's really what's happening, is we're now stepping into a place where we're fragmented and lost versus stepping into our identity. I saw a great quote the other day. Imagine you're walking with 1,000 ancestors behind you. It was just like, wow, that's so cool. So I'm walking with 1,000 farmers behind me.
Stomping away.
But that's the courage element, is it allows us to step into our identity. And the equation I now run with, again, inside out, is identity times courage equals authenticity. So know who you are, because the thing I was struck by with the COVID crisis is people were getting caught up on what's going to happen. They were lost in the unknowing. They were lost in the fear that 80,000 people in New Zealand would die, hundreds of millions of people around the world would die. People were just freaked out by those numbers that the World Health Organization were chucking out. So massive unknowns. Poverty and health are the two major. Napoleon Hill spoke about that in Think and Grow Rich, is one of the two of the 6 ghosts of humanity or something. It was such a wicked concept he talked about them. So poverty and health are our key catastrophes. So then, in recognizing the crisis that we've just had, for me, is that it's really given people an MRI of themselves, because you couldn't hide. You couldn't hide in the crisis, because whether you're well off or in poverty, you got a glimpse in that moment about how your mind was thinking about the crisis as we went into lockdown. Whether we operate from fear and doubt and pessimism, which is, this is the worst thing in the world, this is going to be terrible, the whole world's dead now, this is the end of this, is the apocalypse, or optimism, critical thinking, analytical thinking, connecting to others. You got a glimpse of how you actually roll, because the rest of it in the world is people live in bullshit world. They think they're resilient, but they've never been through any adversity, so they're all shit. Because unless you've actually been through shit, you don't know how you're going to be. No. People have all these hypothetical views. I'll be fine. What have you been through? Nothing. Well, then shut up, because you don't know. The key bit there is this is, I guess, for me, this is the defining moment of their lives, because whether it was a good picture or you're pleased with a picture of how you operated and functioned under that level of crisis or not, it doesn't matter, because that was just an MRI scan, but it's now your choice about where you go from that. So what I found in that was the conversations I was having with people at the start of the crisis. I was just taking people back to identity. So the equation identity times courage equals authenticity. And the Japanese have a beautiful term, which is katsumono, K-A-S-U-M-O-N-O, which means in its English translation is quintessential weirdo. How cool is that?
Quintessential weirdo, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And then that was bestowed. So that was bestowed upon, in the old days, it was a samurai term. So it has a different term now. It seems to be more related now to psychosis and mental health. So it's very sadly, it's become a term which is more associated to that rather than what it was in the past, which was associated to greatness in the past. Because in samurai, who was deadly, but also lived by beautiful values of service and humility and honor, the very, very best of those were called, you can't call yourself that, but that would be a term I'd bestow upon you, for example, if you were that person that you were clearly, because you can see how that sort of person stands out from the rest because they weren't corruptible. They were very, very reliable, whereas most humans are unreliable, totally unreliable, and they don't follow through with anything. And whatever they say, you can't really trust, because at 1 in 100 they might do it, but you don't know. But in the old days, this term referred to the person that was always reliable. Plus, they were deadly. So they're also very good at their trade. So very good at their trade, they do and what they're doing. And I just love that term because identity lived purely from courage will make you so different from everybody else because there's only one of you. And then the real challenge is, well, how deep do we know our history? Because identity for me is your ancestry and the history and the stories that flowed from when as far back as you can go to here and now. And then, because often people do their values-based exercises in the here and now, but it's just a bullshit. It's just a bullshit exercise because they're just plucking terms that resonate with them in the moment, which might be, it's probably the wrong way to look at it. It still can be good exercise. But if you actually track your identity back to your earliest ancestors, and then bring that through with how your people got to where you are today, because a lot of people, I reckon, in the modern world have this view that they're absolutely entitled to what they've got and they've created what they've got and they're special, that they're somehow special than anyone that's been before. And I'm like, what a dork. They are not. It's like, you should be so grateful if you look back to how you can guarantee their parents would have worked much harder than they worked. You can guarantee their grandparents would have been through way more adversity than they've even thought know what's possible when you think about what the early pioneers had here, great grandparents. So if you look at that history, you don't actually have to do your value-based exercise today because your values become very clear based on who your ancestors were. And they're rock solid because they are in your genetics. They're in your social genetics.
Epigenetics and social genetics.
That's right. That's where they are. That's where they are. So you don't actually have to find meaning in them. They hold everything in soul and spirit. So you can see how that becomes an anchor, that the COVID crisis, for those people that were anchored in that way, it became an opportunity.
Yeah, you can turn it that way, but it doesn't always. I think that's the way you frame it, and it's quite powerful with what you've said there. Yeah,
and the challenge of the identity is that the opportunity, the framework of the opportunity comes because once you have identity and courage, it soon becomes very, very clear that your challenge every day is integrity. That's you only need one goal every day when you wake up is just be you, which is the work you've done on your identity. And then the opportunity then from the crisis becomes a moment in time which sees whether you're genuine or not or all shit.
Yeah.
And then that's the moment. But all the athletes and bits and pieces I've been very lucky to be involved with is that's the framework with all of them. Under the moment of greatest pressure, which could be the 75th minute or the 79th minute, I think it's the Crusaders in 2012, in the semi-final, that's the moment. Your defence in the next 30 seconds lets us know whether your identity is genuine or you're all shit. So that little second for those guys, but for us, COVID, for us every day when we're under pressure, wherever it might be, thinking about our next business proposition that we want to be pushing forward and talking to some investors about, the next idea we've got that we want to bring through into a strategic plan. All those there's key moments, boom, boom, boom. Each of those moments is an integrity challenge. And so that's where the COVID for me has been an absolute gift. Obviously the stuff in America is, I think a revolution that's come off the back of that. I don't think it probably would have been like that had it not been for COVID. So there's all these layers to this. But that's for me probably the key bit for people listening to this is the primary goal before anything else is the foundation. The foundation of humanity, the foundation of attachment, the foundation of connection to ourselves and others, and all of that links to our identity, and the identity is our ancestry and history. So there's most homes you go into, they've got a couple of photos on the wall, and then they've got a wall covered in medals and certificates and achievements. And I'm just like, okay, so this family's identity is performance. And you can see straight away, like, why has that teenager got anxiety issues? Why is the teenage boy not talking to his parents and locked in his bedroom and say, get fucked to the world? Well, that's why. But if they had a room and a wall that was dedicated to their ancestors, and they were biking, it would be full of helmets with horns and swords and double-headed axes and shields. You can guarantee they'll be playing 500 around the table every Friday night getting pissed.
Yeah, that's my
Irish heritage. With big kinkers. And it's like Asterix and Obelix. So that's how it then plays through into our today's era, where our mental health stats the worst in the world, one of the worst in the world, and you look at our country. How is that possible?
How is that possible? But I think you're nailing it here, though, David, especially when you look at that reaction to adversity and how our culture with men particularly is been very beaten down. And so being able to get to that point where we can have those conversations and open people up to be vulnerable with that and actually like demask.
And be real.
Be real, you know, that authentic nature is what sort of drive people going forward. And that obviously is for the sports piece, yes, but business and in life, you know, it's how we show up. So I just want to say a huge thank you, David, for today, because my mind's just like buzzing on all the lovely ideas and thoughts and that courage under adversity and authenticity. And we all need that right now. I just think you're just like a wise soul, wise soul. And like I said, I hope I get some more time with you because there is so many bits to unpack. And I think as much as you are retired from your psychology piece, that mind coach, that gift of metaphors and knowledge and how you do that is actually pretty astounding and what we maybe need in the world right now, if you were happy to have a wee chat. So thank you so much.
Workers.
Awesome.
Work at Emma. Okay, cool stuff.